know if you guys remember, in April 2001, we had a mild earthquake out here in Seattle. It was pretty mild as earthquakes go, like only 20 to 30 people were injured, and I don't think anyone actually died. The property damage was also relatively low, but earthquakes, even mild ones, are fairly memorable. I found myself in the basement of Smith Hall when it happened. I was a first-year teaching assistant, and I was reading some theorist or other, and sitting in my really ratty couch. And of course, it's a bit of a dungeon, this particular office. It has pipes and ducts, and the pipes and ducts started rattling. And I thought, well, maybe they're just turning the air conditioner on, it's spring, but the rattling grew, and then I realized it wasn't just the pipes and the ducts that were rattling. So I did what they told me in elementary school, which is, well, basically I stood under the door frame. One of my friends, however, had a very different strategy. He bolted. I mean, he just ran out, climbed the steps, and left the building at the time, which, I mean, they'd always said stand under the door frame, which is what everyone else seemed to be doing. So I assume that's what you're supposed to do. But at that moment, I had a very startling realization. I wasn't afraid. Now, when I thought of it, because, I mean, of course, I really should have been afraid. I mean, the ground was moving as if I were on the deck of a ship. And there was this, except unlike on a ship, there was this sick sort of pulsing energy going beneath my feet. I mean, I've never felt anything like it before, and thank God, not since. I realized the reason I wasn't afraid is that I could not be blamed for this. This was, by definition, an act of God. No one should say, Talal, you should not have been sitting in Smith Hall reading when this happened. You should have been. I mean, where else could I have been? I mean, unless I could have gotten out of Seattle with some foreknowledge. I mean, and I realized at that point that I am more afraid of being blamed than I am of dying in an earthquake. And that's psychologically problematic. I've spent a lot of time working on trying to understand why that happened, because I've been through a lot of other things since then, and I've come to realize through a lot of reading that basically human beings tend to conflate their constructed identities with their physical bodies. And all of the basic reflexes for defense that our bodies have get grafted onto those constructed identities. This is problematic because, well, in a sense, we experience threat a great deal more than most other animals in the animal kingdom because of it. You guys probably have seen, Disney's, It's the Circle of Life, the Lion King, the song they have, and, the orangutan lifts up the lion cub to the sun, and all the gazelles bow. Of course, this doesn't really happen in real life. If lions show up, the gazelles run, because the gazelles are about to become lunch. This is the basic flight or flight impulse. But that's still, as scary as it must be for the gazelles, it's still a fairly limited experience for them. They run until, of course, the lion fells one of the herd, which sucks for the one who gets felled, but basically the rest of them keep running, and the lion stops because it wants to eat, because the lion's very practical about this. And when the lion's out of the sensory range, the herd stops, and they go back to normal. They go back to normal everyday life. The tension passes. This is not what human beings do. Human beings would turn around and say, there are lions! And lions can eat us at any time. They just ate Dave. We need a security plan to keep us safe from lions. We must hunt down every last lion. We must build a fortress to protect us from lions. We're very active in trying to project beyond the current moment. And that comes for big security moments, but honestly, it also accompanies us in some really annoying moments. Some of you are perhaps familiar with the freeway system here in Seattle. We spend about maybe an hour and 15 minutes commuting in and out of town every day, experiencing the flight or fight impulse. We are either scared by what people are doing, especially if they're doing it in the rain and you can't see very well, and then some of our colleagues, or maybe us, can get quite angry about what's going on and express that in powerful ways. The flight or fight impulse is actually very present in our everyday lives. It accompanies us maybe 3 hours a day. Gazelles don't go through that. Gazelles, just when the lion turns up and then it's over. For us, in a way, it's never over. Moreover, our identities are considerably more complex, encompassing so many more parts of our lives than animals ever experience. Some of you may, for example, have a dog. And most of you will probably do the responsible thing and have your dog fixed. And maybe a week or two after the dog gets fixed, the dog's absolutely fine. Nothing is bothering the dog. The surgery has been recovered from. And if you pet the dog and you feed the dog and you take the dog on walks and love the dog is euphoric. Whereas were any of us to be taken to the vet and fixed, this would not turn out so well. Hemingway has written novels about this. Because you see, having the frontal lobes we have, you have this thing called sexual identity. And you will imagine yourself as a parent and as a lover. And even if you're not using those things right now, you will probably want them later. And if someone would take them away from you, that would be a violation of your human rights, an unforgivable act. You can basically be destroyed in ways that your dog cannot imagine. And this accompanies us through life. This constructed identity that we build, the story that we tell about ourselves, we spend endless amounts of time protecting it. But really, if you go back, what is preferable if Talal screwed up teaching, or Talal screwed up on a graduate paper, or Talal screwed up any number of career ways versus if Talal died in an earthquake? But the thing is that what gets conditioned by our daily life is that identity protection. So much so that, in my case, I'm not worried about my body at all. This is what's difficult. The speaking that I'm hoping to do as a graduate of the NSA basically focuses on how do we take this basic concept and understand a whole host of human problems. Those problems, on the one hand, start with things like anger management. How do you deal with traffic? How do you deal with basic problems like resentment, which plague us? And on the other hand, they move over to other more complicated issues, things like trauma, grief. So this is what I hope to be able to do, to try to help people understand how this basic problem of us conflating our body with our constructed identity is leading us to endless tension and strife, and hopefully to realize that our constructed identities we get really carried away with. We need to sort of learn to relax and let go a little bit, because who you are at the end of the day is less important than are you still alive and can you do something, because you can always change who you are, but you can't change the fact that you're dead. Thank you.